try to simulate this problem, or we try to solve this problem by adding the numbers one by one. So first we have to add 1 plus 2, then the result will be added with 3, the result will be added with 4. In this way, we have to perform same type of operations in a repetitive way, in multiple times. Clear? And the bound of how many times you have to compute the operation is bounded by n. Clear? Capital N. Okay. So doing these things, if we understand the problem in this way, simply just so we are first computing 1 plus 2, then the result is 3. Then we compute 3 plus 3, then the result is 6. Then we compute 6 plus 4, the result is 10. And in this way, we are doing a sequence of operation, and the sequence is basically we are performing a same type of operation, add. Okay. And how many times we are doing this operation is bounded by a variable capital N. So finally, we have to do capital N with some result, and we get the final sum. Clear? Understand? So this is our approach. So we are basically doing 1 plus 2, then plus 3, then plus 4, and in this way plus n. And this is my result. Okay. And every time we are doing a unit operation or doing a simple addition operation, store the results, and then again we perform the result with another number, then it stores and it performs the result with another number, and it does the same thing. So this is our process. So what are the variables we have to require? So we identify the variables. The first variables we require is that n, that is the ceiling, means how many times we have to perform the addition. Then there is a sum which will accumulate the intermediate result, like 1 plus 2, it accumulates the result into a variable, and this variable will be used for the further computations. Yes. And there is a n, small n, which is basically the increment, like it will taking the values from 1, 2, 3, 4 up to n. Clear? So now I can modify my statement, or I can do something like this: sum equals to sum plus n, where we initialize sum with 0 and n, small n, with 1. Okay. And then we have another operation which increments n plus 1. So if we do these things repeatedly, if we do these things in a repeated way, then I am able to compute 0 plus 1. This is 0 plus 1. Then n gets with a value of 1, means n is incremented by 2. Then the result is added with 2. Then n is again incremented by 1. So result is added with 3. And in this way, how many times you have to do these things is n times. Okay. So how we can instruct the computer to make a iterative operations, or to make a loop type of scenarios. So before we go to these things, we have a flow chart of scenarios. The flow chart looks something like this. We'll go in details of this part, but just to understand that we have to initialize. We have to read means we have to initialize the capital N. We have to set the sum to a value of 0 and n equals to 1. Okay. So reading means this is the value which varies. Means we have to take the value from the user, or we have to our program will run depending on the variable n. Okay. But setting means these are the initializations. So sum will be always initialized with a 0, n will be always initialized with a 1. But n may varies depending on your situations. Okay. Then there is a while. While loop says means this is a while. While is basically a condition which will iterate the path. So there is a condition. The condition is again a Boolean type of scenarios. It says there is a while, and then we have a condition. Okay. So if the condition is true, if condition is true, we basically iterate the inside of this while loop. If it is false, we jump from the while loop. Yeah. So this is the true case, and this is the false case. Okay. Now we can get that what is the true case. If n, small n, is less than or equals to n, then we are basically performing this two operations: sum equals to sum plus small n, and n equals to n plus 1. Okay. And how many times we are doing these things? As n is modifying, n is taking incrementing by 1 by 1. So at the initial n is with a value of 1, then it will be 2, then it will be 3. And while this small n is less than or equals to the capital N, we are basically performing this operation. Yeah. And as the condition is true, we are repeating. If the condition is false, we immediately jump from the repetitions, and we get the output as a sum. Okay. So it is now we can say that within the while we have small n less than equals to capital N, then sum plus small n, and n equals to n plus 1. So this is my kernel, or this is the core of the solutions. Means if I can design this block, or if I can design this while loop, then my problem is basically solved. Okay. N equals to 5, and we initialize small n equals to 1, sum equals to 0. Then this while loop, at the first case, this while loop will be true. Then sum takes the value of sum will take the value of 0 plus 1. Okay. And n now becomes 1 plus 1. Okay. In the case 2, again the condition will be true because n is less than 5 or less than equals to 5. True. Then again sum will take the value of 1 plus, this will be 1 plus 2, and n will take the value 2 plus 1. Okay. Understand? Then in case 3, again the condition will be true, so sum will take 2 plus 3, means 3 plus 3, and n will take 3 plus 1. So in the case 4, again it will be true, sum will take 6 plus 4, and n will take 4 plus 5. Okay. So now n becomes 5, sum becomes 10, and in the case, again the condition is true because 5 is less than equals to this 5, small n is less than equals to 5. So sum will take 10 plus 5, and n will take 5 plus 1, that is 6. Okay. So now at the iteration number 6, the condition will be false, and nothing will be executed within the while loop, and finally we have the sum as 15, and that is my result. Okay. You get this point?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So these are the three cases, or three types of looping, and this is basically the program that we have written. Oh, so we are not getting deep of this part. So what we understand that what we understand is basically if we want to write a program, first we have to identify how we can have the solutions. Then we identify that what are the variables we may require, and finally we design the logic, and then we try to translate this logic into the programming code. Okay, so so it is recommended that the beginners, or not for even for those who are a little bit familiar with C, first you write, first you do some home handwork, means first you do some something in your papers, then you try to translate these things into the code. Okay? So there are so many things we'll understanding the due process, and so before we jump into the coding, think little bit, do some paperwork, and then you try to implement your code. Okay. So in our next part, for the next part, what we will try to understand. So in the first part, what we understand that how we have to organize our statements, or how we have to organize our logic to get the final solutions or get the final results. But in this part, we try to understand that what are the insight of a C programming language. So every language is basically consists of some vocabularies. Like if you talk about English, we must have a vocabulary. There must be some grammars. There must be some symbols. Symbols are either they are expressive, or they are punctuations in this way. Okay, so C programming language is also designed in with the same philosophy. So we have a finite number of vocabularies. The vocabularies are basically divided into 4 parts. In my previous slide, we can show it. Okay, so this is basically the vocabularies. We divide the vocabularies into 4 parts. One is called the variables, okay? Then operators, then control statements, and the syntax. Okay? The syntax we learn as we practice. The syntax will be the syntaxes will be learned as we practice more programming, because this is basically how we write a statement. There may be some syntactical error. As we keep on as we practice more coding, we'll learn more about the syntax. Okay. The control flow, little bit we have understand that how we have to organize our programs such that the sequence of operations can be linear, or it may be branching, or it may be a iterative. Okay. And that these 2 parts will be learning in the due process. Okay. So first thing is that what is the variables. So now what is the variables? So there are in the C programming language, there are set of statements, or set of words which are called the keywords. Okay. The keywords are basically this is called name, integer, float, characters, then shorts. So these are the keywords which are having some specific meaning. Okay. So like if we write a C program, you define the block, that initial block, as the main block. So so whenever I write a main, then C compiler understand that something special you are telling to the compiler. We are telling something special to the computer. Similarly, int basically represents that the variables are basically integer. Then float represents the variables are floating points or real. Okay. CHAR, it represents that this is we are defining our character types of variables. Okay. So there are different types of keywords, and this is a small list of keywords. As we keep on programming, we are learning more of the keywords. Similarly, if, else, if, then for, do, while, go to, etc., etc. These are different types of keywords. Okay. So a particular finite set of words are basically reserved, and they are called the keyword. Similarly, there are finite set of symbols which are also reserved. So what are the symbols? They are the arithmetic symbols. They may be a conditional symbols, logic symbols, or assignment or referencing symbols. Okay. Arithmetic symbols we all understand. It may be a addition, subtraction, division. Okay. Then conditional are Boolean types of operations like less than, greater than. Then logic operations are basically binary logic operations like AND operation, OR operation, negation operations, etc. Then there are other types of operations which are called the assignment. Assignment means the left hand side, right hand side value is assigned to a variable at the left hand side. Okay. And in future we'll learning that dot operation or pointer operations, array indexing operations, etc. Okay. And then there are some punctuations. The punctuations are not the operators. Punctuations are basically the syntax which says that it is the end of a statement. Like semicolon indicates that this is the end of a statement. Opening and closing brackets, first brackets, they are using to say that this is the definitions of a function. Like we write main in this way. We write say main, then opening and closing. Clear? So this is basically indicating that this is the function. This is the part of the function definition, like printf, tf. Then we put some argument. So hello world. Okay. So this is basically the string, and this opening and closing parenthesis is part of the function. Okay. And then there are double quotes. They are also used for the punctuations, and semicolons, they are used for the punctuation. So there are another set of operations or another set of symbols which are basically used for punctuations. So they are reserved. So these things are basically reserved to indicate the C compiler or to express something which have a special type of meaning. Okay. So apart from these keywords, operators, punctuations, whatever we are writing is treated as a variable. Okay. So if I write in my C program, if I write say main, then say int, then main x or main 1. Okay. And semicolon. That means I am defining a variable. So now this becomes a variable. Okay. But instead of writing main 1, if I have written main, then there will be an error, because main is already used as a keyword. Main is already defined as a keyword. So main cannot have independent existence. Yeah. So it cannot be a variable. So main cannot be defined as a variable. We have to append something. We have to append main 1 or main x or main something to distinguish that this is a variable. Okay. So what is the variable? What is the how we can define a variable? It is simply that what are the keywords, what are the operators, what are the punctuations. Apart from this, everything is a keyword. But if we take some means concatenation, like main int. If I concatenate these things, main int, then this can be a keyword. This can be a variable. Okay. So main independently is a keyword. Int independently act as a keyword. But when we append these things, main int, now it can be treated as a variable. So in this way, C defines that we can define different types of variable, and when we and there are some constraints. Means even there are some constraints. The constraint says that the variable cannot be started with a number. So if we start the variable with some number, it will be an error. Similarly, variable cannot start with an operator, and some punctuations, it cannot be started with some punctuations, etc. Okay. So so the rules are simple. we should variable should not start with numbers, punctuations, or operators. Okay. There is an exception. The underscore symbol can be used as a starting symbol of a variable. Yeah. Okay.
It should be an identifier.
Which one?
Variables.
I mean, identifier is something different. We first talk about the variables, then we'll later cars we talk about identifiers. Okay. So we understand how can we can define a variable, means we can express a variable. Okay? So to name a variable, we first segregate that there is a set of keywords, there is a set of operators, there is a set of punctuations, and if we use a string of alphabets or symbols which does not belongs to this keyword, operator, or punctuation, they can be treated as a variable. Okay. Okay. Oh. So then, what do you mean by the variables? Means when I define a variables, so variables cannot be standalone. So they must have some type. Yeah. And what do you mean by the type? Say like I say, what? Oh, like I say, I have a variable count. Count. Then in my mind, we must have that what we are counting. Yeah, we are counting some integers, like I am counting some whole numbers, like the number of sweets or number of kettles or the number of marks you are scoring. Yeah. So depending on these characteristics, we must have to define that what type of variable this is. Is it an integer? It is a float, or it is a character. So what types of variables we are using? So representing or writing these things in count, it says that count is an integer type of int, integer type of data. These things, it says that this is a real, means decimal, it can capture decimal values. This says that it is not an integer, not a real, it is basically a character. Like as we have my address, so in my address I am writing that this is say 154 Rajendra Mohan Road, say 154 say Mahatma Gandhi Road. Okay. So what is this mean? What is this 154? So 154 is not a number. So it is basically a character, or it is basically representing a character which happens with a statement, say 154 Mahatma Gandhi. Similarly, your phone number. The phone number is not not a basically integer or floating point data. It is basically a string of characters. You are not performing any types of addition, division on this phone numbers. You are basically keeping an identity. Yeah. Understand? Similarly, your roll number is not a integer or floating point data. Okay. It is basically a character. Understand? So we have to identify that what are the what types of data we are representing, and when we are representing the data, what we are doing inside of this part. So inside of these things, we are also associating set of operations. So like for integer, I can do addition, I can do subtraction, I can do multiplication, I can do division, or I can do different types of operations. Yeah. For floating point data, we also have a defined type of operations on this part. Yeah. So for character, I am doing something. Say I can do addition, subtractions, or etc. etc. Okay. So depending on this type, we are basically attaching some set of operations on the data or on this type. So if it is an integer, a simple example is that if it is an integer, So I can do a modulo operation here. So if it is a float, I cannot do a modulo operation. This is not allowed. Clear? Understand? So now we can understand that what do we mean by the type. So type is basically I am specifying that what types of value we are storing, and at the same time I am also specifying that what are the set of operations we can apply on this data. Okay. So these are the main things. Say when we are defining variables, we always define the variables with a type. So C programming language is having these constraints. We have to always define the variables with a type. Okay? And when it is a type in the inline part or inside of this compiler, it is also defined that it will have a specific type of operations. It can perform a specific type of operations. Okay? So what do you mean by this type? The type defines three things. The first thing is that how we represent the value. As we already explained, we have represented the value as an integer or a floating point, character, etc. So there may be an array. If somebody understands, then there is also a linear organization of the data, which is called array. But leave it at this part. We'll get in details of this part of this array. And the second thing is that what are the operations we are applying on the variables. So these two parts we have already gone through, the set of operations and the values. And the second thing is that, the third thing is that the size of the variables, means size of the variables and the representation of the data is also an important part for the type. So to understand these things, let we say I have declared an integer, say integer x, yeah, and I have declared a character x. Yeah. So they are having the same variable names. X is an integer, x is a character. So what is the how the compiler organize these things? How compiler will act on this part, or how your machine will act on this part? So for a compiler, if for a particular type, say if it is an integer, it has a representation of that data. It basically reserves some memory. Generally, it is a 32 bits memory or 32 bits continuous cell, which is reserved for this x because it is an integer. So we call that integer is size 32 bits. So integer is 32 bits. Okay. So when it is a character, it will reserve only memory of 8 bits. Okay. And then we say that character is 8 bits. Okay. So the two things we already understand: the representations, the operations, and the third thing is that what is the size of these things, what is the size of the data, and how they will be represented in the value. Yeah. So when it is an integer, they are basically represented as a byte. Means if we want to say integer x is equals to 10, then there will be 32 bits, and instead of storing 10 as a 10, it represents these things in binary 1001, and that things will be stored in the memory. So it will be 100, and rest of these things are all zeros, etc., etc. And so it looks something like this. Okay? So instead of when it is a character x as
Sir, 10 is not 1010.
1010. Yes, sir.
101. Yes, sorry, it is 9. Let it be 9. And then it is 100. Instead of, if it is a character of say 9 here, then what will be represented? So shall it store 1001 here, or it will store something different.
Sir, it will store the ASCII value of 9.
Yes.
Okay, so it will not store this thing. Rather, we have a coding mechanisms, like as this is 8 bits, so there are 256 possibilities. Okay. Let me go through these things. So as character is as character is 8 bits. Yeah. So I can have the representation of something like this. Then this one, and this. Let me do one more thing. 10, and going of these things, there will be 1. Bits numbers are possible is 256. There are 256 different numbers can be possible. The first number is 00000, then 0000001, and so on. Okay. Or let it be a 1, sorry, 0, 1, 2, then 3, and keep on doing these things. We'll get 255. Okay. So there are 256 possibilities, and in our keyboard we are having something 116 or something like that. Yes, symbols. So there is a standard coding mechanisms are there. So every symbols are encoded with a ASCII code. ASCII code. Say I have A, capital A, so it has a corresponding code. Capital B, it has a corresponding code. Small a, it has a code. Small b, it has a code. Similarly, 0, 1, 2, 9, all they are having a fixed code, and this code is called the ASCII. Okay. So whenever we represent these things as a character, instead of its numerical value or its binary representations, we are not storing these things. We are storing the ASCII code of ASCII of 9. Understand? Clear? Get it? So at this point, you just understand what is binary representation of a number. So whenever we are representing as a value, as integer, so what we can do, we have to store the binary representation of the number, say 9 or 10, whatever. But whenever we are representing as a character, so we are not storing that binary representations. We are rather storing different things, and these different things is basically a standard coding mechanisms are there, and depending on these coding mechanisms, we are storing that values. So this is basically ASCII code. This coding mechanism is called the ASCII code, and they are used in globally. Means there is a global standards. Depending on these things, every computer works on that part. Yeah. So at this point, we just try to understand that whenever we are trying to define a type, whenever we are expressing a type, so we are basically expressing three things. The first thing is that what are the characteristics of the data. Then what are the operations that can be defined on this data, and how the computer will store and they will operate on these representations of the data. Okay. So if we say that integer, so generally in most of the computers or most of the compilers, we are C compilers, we are using a integer as a 4 byte or 32 bytes representations, and characters are basically 1 bytes of representation. Okay. Some compilers may have variations, but most of the standard C compilers have in this type of representations. Okay. So now we will learn a little bit of the representations in details. So before we go through this part, just we try to express that what are the number systems, how we are representing the numbers. Okay. So we'll try to explain that how the integers will be represented, how the floating points or the real numbers will be represented, and how the sign or unsigned numbers are represented in the computer. Okay. So, a little bit of there were 15 cattle, then they used to store 15 stones or bones. Yeah. And then they are mapping, say, every bones with the cattle. Yeah. So now this basically starts with a unary number systems. The unary number systems are basically every number is an entity of one. So if I have 5, then I must have five symbols. If I have 20, then I must have 20 distinct symbols. Understand? Okay. Then it becomes very difficult for unary number systems when we are doing some arithmetics. Okay. Then people develop different types of positional number systems. The position, one of the best example of the positional number system is the decimal number system. So in this case, what happens? The positional number system is that there is a positions which are called the base, and there are some digits which are symbols. Okay. Say like if I take the decimal number systems, say like if I write 5, 3, 2, then what are the symbols we are using? Or digits we are using? We are using 10 distinct symbols: 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. In Bengali, we may have different symbols. In Tamil, there are different symbols. But every decimal number system has 10 distinct symbols. Understand? And then there is positions. This position is called position 10 to the power 1 because there are 10 symbols. So we have a base which is called 10. And this position is 10 to the power 0, or this is 10 into say 0 into 10. This is 1 into 10. This is 10 into 10. And if we go further, say this will be 100 into 10. Or this position is multiplied by 10. This position is multiplied by 10. This position is multiplied by 10. Okay? And the number 5, 3, 7, how they are evaluated, how its value will be evaluated. It's basically we take these things, say 0 into 10 into 2. So this is multiplied here. Then added 1 into 10 into 3. This multiplied here. Then added 10 into 5 multiplied here. And if there are more, then we keep on doing these things. 100 into 10 into 7. Okay. And now we have accumulated the count, and now we understand. So this is 7,532. Okay. So that means if I have counted, say 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, then 7, then 8, then 9. And when 9 is done, then it goes to the second part. So it moves to the second part. Okay. In this way, each there are. Yes?
Sir, we multiply 0 in the case of 2. 2 multiplied by 10 multiplied by 0.
Oh, no, this is 1. Sorry, this is 1. Oh, this is 1. Sorry. This is 1. Then we multiply by 10. Then 10, 10, 10. Okay. So initially it is 1. So 1 multiplied by 10, we get the 10 position. 10 multiplied by 10, we get the 100 position. 100 multiplied by 10, we get the 1000 position in this. Okay. So it is 1, then 10, then say 10 square, then 10 cube, and keep on doing these things. So this is this, say 10 to the power 4. Okay. And then numbers are just multiplied here, accumulated 3, accumulated 5, accumulated in this. Okay. So there was a mistake. So we start with 1, then it is multiplied by the base is 10. Then again, the position is multiplied by the base, so it becomes 100, then 1000, etc. So this is how we shifted from the unary to a position number systems. Now the position number systems, the heart of this position number systems are basically there are two entities. One is called the symbols or alphabets or digits, whatever you want to name, and then it's called the base or the radix. Okay. So now if we take the base as 10, we call these things decimal number. If we take the base as 2, then we term these things as a binary. So now this becomes a binary. And what are the symbols in binary? We have only two symbols. The number of symbols
0, 1.
0, 1. What means 0, 1 is the basic practice. So the number of symbols determines that what is the base. Okay. So if I have 10 symbols, then the number of symbols determines it is a decimal number. So these symbols are basically a practice. Means like if English we have the digit 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. If your local language we have different symbols. Yeah. So don't make it confused that every decimal are having 0 to 9. So they have different symbols in different languages. So binary is also having something like this. This is the general practice. Sometimes in any case you can use T and false, true and false, which is also a binary representation. On off or something like that. Okay. But just the basic thing is that there will be symbols and the number of symbols define the base. Okay. And now if we have a binary representation, say a number 0, 1, 1, 0 in binary, okay, then how can we get the decimal value, or how can we understand what is the value of this? Okay. So we can understand these things by taking the same representation. This is 2, then 2 square, then 2 to the power, then 2 to the power 4, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And now it multiplies by 1. Using a different color. Yes. So plus multiplied 0 plus multiplied 1 plus 0 plus 1. Yes, sir. So
Yes.
we got 4 gets 2 square gets 1. Okay.
21.
So 21 somebody says. Okay. So now this is its value. Means value means we understand that the 21 entities are unary. This is basically the unary part. 21 entities having the binary representations of 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. Okay. Understand? And that is what we have discussed here. Okay. So these are the decimal. This is the binary 13, which is represented in this. Okay. Another part is that what we have done, we have taken a binary and we are computing its value. So what is another? How we can translate a unary or any number or in decimal to a binary. So whatever we have done is basically we have converted the binary number into its value or into a representation of a decimal. So this is equal to the representation of the decimal. So, but what is another computations? How can we compute a decimal number to a binary number? Okay. So let me do these things. Let me take a 25. Okay. So how can we do these things? So there are two mechanisms to represent this thing. So the basic thing is that we we have the representation in the binary as a base of 2. Okay. So I have to first represent these things as a multiple of 2 with something. Say it can be represented as 2 into 12 plus 1. Okay. Understand? Do you get this point? 25 can
Yes,
be
sir.
represented as something
Yes,
else.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Now try to do these things repeatedly. We try to represent 12 in this form. So it will be 2 into 2 into 6 plus 0 plus 1. Okay. And it looks something like this. 1, say 2 into 0 plus 2 square into 6. Get it? Understand? So
Yes, sir.
this is already in a binary part. Now we have to work with this 6 elements. So what we can do, we take 4 plus 2, 2 into 3 plus 0. And rest it comes 2 into 0 plus 1. Okay. Do you get this point? So again, if we simplify these things, this will be 2 into 2 to the power cube into 3 plus 2 square into 0 plus 2 into 0 plus 1. So now this is already in binary. So we have to reduce 3. So again we take it here, then 2 cube, then 2 into 1 plus 1. And rest we copy 2 square into 0 plus 2 into 0 plus 1. Okay. And doing these things, this becomes 2 to the power 4 to the power 4 into 1 plus 2 cube into 1, 2 square into 0 plus 2 into 0 plus 1. Okay. And now we get a representation of the binary. Okay. Do you get this? Do you understand this part?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So what we are doing, we are trying to represent these things 2 into some x plus some remainder. Okay. And then we repeatedly doing these things 2 into some x1 like this plus remainder 1, and that becomes outside of this part. Okay. And again we repeatedly doing these things, then we have a binary representation of the signal. Okay. Okay. The same techniques as we are doing from top to bottom, we are basically performing another one. Say what was the number? 25. So we take 25. So now what we are doing, we just divide these things into. So there will be 12, there will be a remainder of 1. So this one becomes the we call this least significant bit. Yeah, we discussed this. Then again we take 12. So we divide 12. So we get 6. We get a remainder of 0. Then 0 appears. Yes. Hello. Oh. Then we take 6. We divide by 2. Then 3. Remainder is 0. We write 0 here. Then 3. We divide by 2. Then remainder is 1. We write 1. Then it takes 1, 2, 0. Remainder is 1. We write 1. So the process terminates when the quotient is 0. Is the next method means in the decimal number, say 5, 3, 7, 1. So this digit is called least significant, and this digit is called most significant. The least significant are the element which are having the least exponent. So it is say 10 to the power 0 into 1, and this is the most significant, say 10 to the power 4 into 5. Okay. So least significant are basically appearing at the right hand side. The most significant appears in the left hand side of a number. Okay. So the two techniques are basically similar. So what we are doing here is what we are writing in a repeated division. So previously we are also doing the repeated divisions, and now we are also performing the repeated divisions. We are capturing the remainders. This is the least significant. This is the most significant. This is the first division operation, second division, third division, fourth, and the fifth division. Okay. The process terminates when we have a quotient as a 0. Okay. So this is how we convert or how we map the binary into a decimal, or we map the decimals into a binary. Okay.
Sir,
You understand this point? Yes.
say in C language,
Yes,
sir, when we declare that the main function will return value of in data type, they will return 0 from the main function. So, sir, will there be
yes.
any problem if we return any integer other than 0 from the main function?
No, there will be no problem if we return any value, positive, negative, any values. But just try to explain these things why we are doing these things. Say we have a assignment in our past lab sessions where we try to solve the roots of quadratic. So what we are including? So in my main, so in the first case we have a condition checks. We check if
Finally completed.
এখানে তো ভালো, এখানে তো
if
অনলাইনে
A
দেখানো ভালো লাগছে না
is
বেশি।
equals to 0, means if the quadratic is a x square plus bx plus c equals to 0. So that means the meaning of a equals to 0. That means this equation is not yet a quadratic equation. This is a linear equation. So what we have to terminate my program here. So I can return print f. I can return that the equation is not quadratic. Clear? And
অনলাইন পড়াবে
instead of
অফলাইন এক্সাম
returning
দেবে
a 0,
হারামি।
I can return
হ্যাঁ
say 2. That means when this main is executed, it checks these conditions. And if the condition is true, instead of it executing the rest of the sequence, it returns from here with a value of 2. Yeah. Understand? Otherwise, if the condition is false, then I can start my program where I return a 0. Okay. That means when it returns 0, that means the program is successfully executed. Okay.
It's a standard way to return 0 from the main function other than any other integer.
Yes, it is basically a condition, means when we are having some error, when we are having some exceptions. So these are the exceptions. Understand? So if you instruct a calling function that we have encountered exceptions, then we are returning something different. It means not a 0. We are returning a positive or we are returning a negative. Such that your call function will understand that the another function has not performed correctly. They have written some error message. Otherwise, there is no way to instruct the calling function that I have not done my part correctly. So I have to return something to the called function with either a 0, 0 stands for the successful executions, and other than 0, it has some different meanings. Yeah, it may be 2, 3 or something like that. Okay. In your old page, you will sometimes get that error message is 550. So they have a different meaning. So what is the 550? They have a different. That means your web browser has not performed correctly, so it has returned some error message, and that error message is shown to you. Okay. Get it?
Yes, sir.
So, okay. Any other questions?
Sir, please explain the last side one more.
So, return part.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So generally, say my problem is to I have to compute bx plus c equals to 0. So there are exceptions. What are the exceptions? The exception is that if a is equals to 0, then we are not having a quadratic condition. Similarly, we compute d, which is b square minus 4ac. So if, sorry, this is d. So if d is less than 0, then the thing is imaginary. So these are the exceptions. So in my program, say I am writing a mean, and there is no harm to get a return of 0. But say I have written another program.
Sir, time is over, sir. Another class is started, sir.
Sir, we have a electron technology class.
Okay. So we'll take these things in the next class. But just to
to conclude, what I should point out, what Sir is pointing out about this return 0 and 1, you should accept it as a convention. It is universally accepted convention for some other purpose, which may not be evident for this particular course. For a standalone program, you can return anything, 1, 0, -1, whatever, but it is good to follow the convention so then later on, when you actually work on some system, when people from different countries are working, okay, there must be some universal common understanding. Okay, so anything, whatever is running successful is coded as 0, and all different types of errors are encoded as different non-zero numbers. That's why we make a practice that we assume that our program will run successfully in standalone mode. We use return 0 for the timing. Okay. So later on you will actually realize why we should follow this convention. Okay.